Elizabeth Short, 22-year-old female from Medford, Massachusetts. It's LAMBJ Day. Revelers pour down Hollywood Boulevard. Girls lean out of cars. Soldiers and sailors run up and grab kisses. There's a pretty dark-haired girl caught in close-up. It's Betty Short.
January 15th, 1947. Around 10 a.m., Betty Berzinger, a local housewife, was walking down Norton Avenue in Los Angeles when she saw something disturbing in an empty lot on the street. When she first saw the corpse, Berzinger said that the body was so white that at first she assumed it to be a mannequin. But when she realized that what she was looking at was actually a severed corpse, she ran to contact the authorities. The body Berzinger found was Elizabeth Short, known posthumously as the Black Dahlia. Her body was split in half at the waist, and pieces of her flesh had been cut away from her body. And while she was severely mutilated, there was no blood anywhere to be found, suggesting that the body had been thoroughly cleaned before being positioned at that spot on Norton Avenue. The LAPD identified Elizabeth Short by her fingerprints, and an autopsy was performed on Short's body on January 16, 1947. Marks on her body suggested that the woman had been bound and tortured, and her official cause of death was cerebral hemorrhage and shock. The police then sent out a bulletin in hopes of finding more information about the victim. Eventually, some details about Elizabeth Short were uncovered. She moved to Los Angeles in July of 1946. She worked as a waitress, as she struggled to get acting roles in Hollywood, and she lived in a rented room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. As news about Short's murder began to circulate, newspapers started referring to her as the Black Dahlia, mostly due to her striking dyed black hair and the black clothing she wore. The story of the Black Dahlia made headlines for weeks. On January 24th, 1947, a suspicious manila envelope addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers was discovered. The envelope included a letter using cutout words from newspaper clippings that said, "Here's Dahlia's belongings." Inside the envelope were Short's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book. All of the contents of the envelope had been cleaned with gasoline, similar to how Short's body had been cleaned. This led authorities to believe that the letter was definitely from Short's killer. Police contacted approximately 75 men from Short's address book, but the majority of the men claimed to have only known her briefly. Due to the nature of the precise cuts on Short's body, authorities suspected someone in the medical field could have been the killer, and police served a warrant to USC Medical School, which was located close to where Short's body had been found. But after several interviews and background checks, they were still no closer to solving the case. Although the case went cold, people's fascination with the story has not dissipated. Elizabeth Short's unsolved murder has inspired many books and films, both fiction and nonfiction. The most famous account of Elizabeth Short's murder is The Black Dahlia, a 2008 novel that fictionalizes the details of the fascinating story. The novel is so well researched and so vividly rendered that many readers have said that they had to remind themselves that it was fiction and not true crime. There are many theories about who could have committed this crime. A large number of people have actually come forward to confess to the crime, but most of these confessions have been proven to be false. Some crime authors have made a link to the Black Dahlia murder and the Cleveland Torso murders, which took place between 1934 and 1938. At the time of the investigation, Leslie Short was considered to be the prime suspect, but he was never brought to trial because of clerical errors. This, along with the other details of the case, has led some theorists to believe that the Black Dahlia's murder was never solved because of a police cover-up. After retiring from the LAPD, former police detective Steve Hodel published a true crime book called Black Dahlia Murder: A Genius for Murder. In it, Hodel lays out many details of the investigation and presents his own theory. He believes his own father, Dr. George Hodel, killed the Black Dahlia.
My father was Dr. George Hodel. He was a famous physician. He was also the prime suspect and the killer of Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia. My dad was head of LA County Health Department, handsome, beautiful speaking voice.
Brown is the river, golden is the sand. It flows along forever with trees on either hand.
In 1949, my mother suddenly places my brothers and I in a military academy. Dad's gone, and we don't know what's happening. We would discover that my half-sister Tamar disclosed that our father had had sex with her. Dad was charged with incest and child molestation and was found not guilty. After 4 years in the Navy, I joined LAPD at 21, 5 years in patrol, 17 in homicide, 300 murder investigations. I served for almost 24 years. My father gets a penthouse in San Francisco. We become very close in that last decade of his life. And then I get that 3 a.m. phone call in 1999 from his wife, June. She says, "Your father's collapsed, and they've just pronounced him dead." 2 days later, I'm on the phone with my half-sister Tamar. She says, "The LAPD cops that took me back and forth to the trial said, we think your father killed the Black Dahlia." And I said, "Well, Tamar, there's no way." I said, "Well, I'm going to be able to establish he had nothing to do with it." But the first thing I discovered is LAPD is confident that the killer was a trained, skilled surgeon. Well, my father was a trained, skilled surgeon, but still, I said, there's no way. The next thing I find out is the Black Dahlia killer is sending taunting notes to the police and the press. This one note, full, non-disguised handwriting. It's my father's handwriting. I've identified it, and so have experts. I relocate back to Los Angeles, and I start a full-bore investigation, like I'm trained to do. The circumstantial case was building on Elizabeth Short. We've got the surgeon, we've got the handwriting, then the description of the suspect that was actually seen at the crime scene. A witness was a half block away, and he saw this 1936 dark sedan. Well, Dad at that time was driving a 1936 black Packard sedan. After digging into it and getting all the witness statements from that time period, I submitted in secret to an active head deputy DA. He came back and he said, "Based on your investigation, I would file on Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, and I would win it in a jury trial." I get permission to actually examine some secret files. And there's a Hodel file. I find out he was the prime suspect all along, and I find out that they tape recorded our residence. His actual words are, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." I didn't go to this case, it came to me. This man spread so much horror. The tragedy of it is he could have cured cancer. I mean, he could have done anything. And this dark side, this evil monster within, was the power that ruled.
While there are numerous theories about what truly happened to Elizabeth Short, the case remains unsolved, and it remains a fascinating true crime story that has inspired many mystery novels and films in the years since.